Hi, my name is Pelle. I am the developer of Flightplan Visualizer. This is the first video I'm recording, and it will show the outline of the product, what it can do. And later on I will record some additional specialized videos. I would like to thank you, Alpha India Group and Eric Steinmetz, for allowing me to bundle many of their flight plans with this product. So once you install Flightplan Visualizer, you'll have a lot of flight plans installed already if you choose to do so. From the Alpha India Group, there will be about 300 commercial flights, and from Eric Steinmetz, there'll be about 380 business jet flights, mostly in the US. Whenever you start Flightplan Visualizer, it will show a splash screen that's displayed while it loads data. And the reason for this is it loads all the data it needs into memory to have the application feel snappy, not having to load while you use the application. What you see here is the main form, and here we have displayed a flight from the flight plan for Danish air transport by Johan Clausen. All airports are marked with balloon markers, and the lines between them are the routes being flown by the airplanes. You see the markers are colored according to the size classification of each airport. And for some of the airports, you'll see they contain a star, and that star tells that it's an airport that I, in my installation, have marked as a favorite. Whenever you hover the mouse over the airport, as you see here, a hint window will open, show some basic information about the airport, and the last line here is a hint text line that I have entered for this airport. When you move the mouse around the screen, you see here in the lower part of the screen, you can see the GPS position of the mouse. And the routes, likewise, when you hover the mouse, it tells you the two airports and the distance between them. In the help menu, you have access to a quick manual. It will open as a PDF file, and this in the same manner the actual manual can be opened from this one as well. And also in the help menu you find the about box. The about box obviously tell you which version it is, but you have all the history, what have been added. So when you upgrade, you can see the new features that have been added to the program since you last updated. To use the map, you can use the scroll wheel to zoom in, and you can click and drag to move the map around. Also in the lower lower right corner of the screen, you can choose the map provider. In this case, I use OpenStreetMap, but you can change it if you prefer Bing or anything else. Also in the lower right corner, you see the daylight saving time date. Normally it will default to today's date, but you can change it, and it's used to when times are converted from UTC times to local times. It will use that date to see if that country is in or out of daylight saving times. In the lower left corner of the screen, you see various checkboxes, and these can be used to choose what is displayed on the map. By default, it will show all the airports and routes that are part of the flight plan, and it will show the routes to and from Pseudo airports, and it will display Pseudo airports. A pseudo airport is an airport that's used in a flight plan, but you don't have in your scenery. This is most obvious with some of the Chinese flight plans, for example. This drop box let me choose which flight plan to visualize. And if we choose, for example, China Eastern, we will see some of the routes are marked in magenta and some of the airports are marked with gray balloon markers. These, the gray balloon markers are used for the pseudo airports, and the routes to and from them are the magenta lines. So these are part of this flight plan. However, you are not able to fly these flights prepared because these airports do not exist. So if you prefer not to see them, you can disable these two checkboxes and those flights will disappear. Also, you can choose, right now I only see the airports that are part of this flight plan, but I can choose to show all the airports on the map based on the size classification. For instance, I can choose to see all major airports, all medium airports, all minor airports, all small and all tiny. Normally I will run it like this. I will see the pseudo airports, I will see those part of the flight plan, and I will see those that I have marked as my favorites. A favorite airport can be an airport for which you have bought a third-party scenery, or it can be an airport where you have, for example, when Microsoft was making Flight Simulator X, they took some of the airports and did some additional work to them, so they looked better than other airports, and those I have chosen to mark as my favorites. Next, we are going to look at favorite aircrafts. In the MISC menu, you have this menu item called Choose Favorite Aircraft, and this is how I have set it up. I have chosen the airports that I own, or the airports that can be substitute for some of those. For example, I have the Aerosoft Airbus 318, 19, 20 and 21, so I have marked those as my favorites. I have most of the PMG Boeings, so obviously those are marked as my favorite also. For example, the 777. I have the Majestic Q400, so it's marked as well. I don't have an MD-11 freighter, but I have marked it anyway. And that's because those flights that would be served by this plane, I would choose to fly them in the 777 freighter instead. So even though I don't own an MD-11, I have selected that. And the reason you want to choose your favorites is because later in this video I'll show you how you can filter in different places in the software to only show those airplanes you have marked as your favorites. Here I have reverted back to show the Danish air transport flight plan, and I want to see some of the details for one of the airports. In this case I choose Copenhagen and I simply double click it. A form will open, show the details about this airport split into 5 different note tabs. In the top you can see the ICAO and IATA code, the name of the airport, the city, the country and state. You can see from which scenery the data from this airport is obtained, and you can see the GPS position of the airport. Based on the DST dates we talked about before, I can see the Zulu time and the local time. So at the time I'm recording this, it's 09:35 local, and it's 08:35 changed to 36 Zulu time. And I have marked this as one of my favorite airports. As we talked about before, the colors of the markers are based on size categorization, and the software will automatically calculate a size based on how many runways it have, how long they are, how many gates it have of different sizes. So in this case, it's classified Copenhagen as a major airport. If you disagree with any of these classifications, you have the means to change it to something else you feel is more appropriate. Likewise, the software also have either information about or have calculated the taxi in and taxi out times. For some of the airports, I've been able to obtain some real-life data of average taxi in and out times, and for other airports, it's based it's based on the data available from the scenery, a number of gates and runways and so on. And like the size category, if you want to choose something else manually, you are able to do so. Again, we have some additional data from the scenery, the elevation of the airport, the transition altitude, it's not from scenery, the magnetic variation. We have the time zone, and we have the offset from GMT. Denmark is distant 1 hour from Greenwich time. And when we are observing DST, it will add additional 1 hour. We are not observing DST at the moment, and that's why the difference between these two times is only 1 hour. When we come to summertime, it will be a distance of 2 hours. In this info note tab, you have a big comment field. I used to write which gate I preferred. I would test the scenery with different planes. I would opt to choose a gate that had a gateway, and gates that some sceneries have very bad AFCAT, so it's not uncommon you see two airplanes trying to occupy the same place. So I went in for my favorite airports and marked the gates I would prefer to use based on what plane I was using. I will show later why you don't need to do something like this anymore, but the comment field, you can write whatever you want. Also, you are able to rank your airports. When you install the program, the airports are not ranked, so it's something you have to do yourself. In this case, Copenhagen is one of those airports I told about that Microsoft did some extra work to. So therefore, I have marked it as an enhanced airport. And based on the AI traffic I have installed, I have marked this as a full occupied airport. And this is a feature you can choose to use or not. I use it for my major airports, the airports I like to fly in and out. I go look how they look to me, and I give them a rank, and I give them a traffic density. And the reason you might want to do this is because you can filter on this. For example, you can search all flights to and from airports that have traffic density settings above a certain value, or you can choose to only show your favorite airports and so on. Here you have a line of hint text, and that hint text is showed when you hover the mouse over the airport. So if I go back to the map and hover the mouse, you can see the hint text as the last line in this window. So here you can enter whatever you want. Also from the scenery I obtain all the frequencies for the various stations at that airport. It will download and display the weather, both the META and the TAF for Copenhagen in this instance. And if I hit decode, I can have the raw META translated to those who are not skilled at reading META. And the same with the TAF. The actual weather can be obtained from different sources. I run with Active Sky. So normally I would choose Active Sky as my weather provider. It means that Active Sky have to be installed, and I will have to set up Flightplan visualizer to read the data. It's described in the manual how you set it up, but basically you just need to tell it where to find the Active Sky file. The NOAA provider here is a web provider, so the weather is downloaded using the internet, and it will always be the real-time weather. However, if you use Active Sky, it will show the weather as you set it up in Active Sky. For instance, I often run with historic weather to fly a flight at a specific date in the past. And I will need to choose Active Sky as my provider here to see the weather at that day. Choosing the NOAA provider, I would see the real-time weather. If we go to the runways node tab, you will see the runways at Copenhagen. And when I click one of the runways, I will see the aircrafts that are able to take off and land from that runway based on the data about that airplane and the length of the runway. And before we set up our favorite aircrafts, so I can choose to only show this information for the aircraft I actually own. For instance, I don't have an Airbus 380, so why would I know if it can land here or not? When we switch to the gates node tab, we see a list of all the gates. And if I pick a particular gate, the map will zoom in on that gate, and it will show me all the aircrafts that are able to park at this gate based on the radius of the gate and the radius requirement of that aircraft. And again, I don't own a 707, so I can remove that from my list and only show my favorites. And based on the size of this, the 747 is one of my favorite, but based on the size of this gate, it's not able to park here, so it's not on this list. You see some of the gates have a yellow outline, and that's like I explained here with my favorites. It's simply because I have marked these as my favorites. I can right click it and say edit gate info. I can select it as my favorite, and I can enter a comment. In this case, I mark this as being appropriate for a 747 or a 777. And it's used when I hover the mouse over the gate marker, I will see that comment line. And the color of the gates tells me the classification used in the scenery. This one is a heavy gate. This one is a medium gate. and this is a small gate, a minor gate. And we have the general aviation as these cyan gates. The little tip on the gate marker is used to mark the direction of the gate. The scenery I have from Copenhagen is the default scenery from prepared. And as you can see, it's not, that scenery is not very precise. So in this case, you will see the gates in the middle of the terminal buildings. And it's because it will not line up. For most third-party airports, it's not a problem, and many of the default airports are actually very okay, but Copenhagen is not. If I go choose Billund instead, it's a third-party airport. And if you look here, the gates are placed as they should be placed. No problems here. Let's go back to Copenhagen. These were the gates and how to mark them as favorites. Here you can also choose another map provider if you want to, and as you move the mouse around you can see the GPS position of the mouse. If you prefer to see it as a decimal degree value, you can click here and it will change to that, and click to revert back. Based on the active selected flight plan, when you go to the legs page, you will see the flight that are either inbound to Copenhagen or outbound from Copenhagen. In this case, I have only chosen to set up a flight plan from DATs, so it will only show DAT flights in and out of Copenhagen. You can click the header to sort it. If I want to sort it by aircraft type, for instance, I can see all the 320 flights up here, and so on. I can choose to only use my favorites. As you look here, I have some ATR flights, and I don't own that airplane, so I can choose to disregard it and only show flight legs that are flown by my favorite aircrafts. It will default to show the time in local time. So in this case, it's an inbound flight, and it comes from Greece, and it took off from Greece 8:10 local. And it will arrive at Copenhagen 11:05 local. The flight time, here you will see two values. The first value is from the flight plan. And the flight plan lists this time between these two as 2 hours and 55 minutes. But in some cases, the flight plan might be very wrong. I spoke with Johan Clausen about this. He's making many of these AEG flight plans. And sometimes they have to do that for technical issues to be able to do the flights. And sometimes, of course, it's simply due to errors in flight plans. So beside the flight time from the flight plan, I also manually calculate a flight time based on the distance between the airports and the aircrafts being used. So in this case, I have calculated the time as well, and it's in this case very near to the flight time from the flight plan. Normally, I would choose to use the time from the flight plan unless there is a big difference in the times. But most of these are in the neighborhood of each other, so If it's 2:55 or 3:01, I would choose 2:55. Here we see the distance between the two airports, and we see the flight level from the flight plan listed as well. And last but not least, we have a tab sheet showing the in and outbound traffic as graphs. You have to remember we are only looking at this single flight plan. So it's not telling us all the traffic going in and out of Copenhagen. But from this carrier, we have a daily amount of about 12 flights a day. I can choose to see, if I want to, I can choose to see the actual value for a specific weekday, or normally I just want to see the average for the week. This is the inbound versus outbound, with inbound in blue and outbound in red. And you can choose different graphs, only to see the inbound, only to see the outbound. You can choose to see the aircraft types. When you hover the mouse, it will show that you can see the same percentage and average values as you see here. And you can choose to look at the usage, the plane types, if it's a passenger or cargo, and as Danish Air Transport don't have any cargo in and out of Copenhagen, it's only passenger flights. And it's only one carrier we're looking at, so it 100% will be Danish Air Transport, and 100% will be the same operator. If I instead go back and right-click Copenhagen and choose leg search to from Copenhagen, it will open this window. I will explain it later. Here I simply search and say OK. And I will see, based on all my flight plans, all the flights I have in and out of Copenhagen. So now when I go into Copenhagen and I choose traffic, I would see I have a daily amount of about 356 airplanes going in and out of Copenhagen. And when I go to the type of aircraft, you'll see many more different planes. And likewise, when you choose the usage, I can now see I have passenger flights, freight, and general aviation. And when I choose the carrier, I can see that most of the traffic is Scandinavian Airlines, Norwegian Air Shuttle, Ryanair, EasyJet, and so on. It's hard to read the values from the pie, but they're all listed here based on size. Most are Scandinavian, least are Blue Air. And this is a carrier. The carrier can choose to have some operator to operate their flights. So if you look at the carrier, it says 34% is Scandinavian. If you go to operator, it's only 23. So it gives you a little information about what kind of flights are going in and out of an airport. You can use this graph to see when there's most traffic coming in and out of the airport. For instance, if you're going to fly to local time, 2 o'clock in the night, you will not see many airplanes taking off, landing beside yourself, based on the if you have all these flight plans installed as AE traffic into your simulator. It will default to local time, but you can switch to Zulu time instead. So this is the information that's presented for each airport. Simply double-click an airport and you have access to all this information. Next, we're going to look at the search feature. In the example before, I simply scrolled the map to Copenhagen. I double-clicked the marker, and it was easy because the marker was part of the flight plan and I knew where to find Copenhagen. But in case you don't know where an airport is located, you can use the search feature. Simply press Ctrl A and the search window will open. You can base your search on many things. You can filter by many things, but in most cases you perhaps know the ICAO code and you simply enter that. So for instance, to find Boston, I simply enter KBus, and in this case it only finds a single airport, and I simply double click it and it will open the airport info form for Boston. And like we saw before, I have all these note tabs with information. Going back to the search, let's choose this take. I only enter Cabo without the S, and there are many different airports that it finds. It will automatically highlight the airport that either have what you enter as the ICAO code or the IATA code. In this case, there is an airport with the IATA code Cabo, so that's the one highlighted, but you don't have to click even though this field have focus. You can use the arrow keys to choose which airport to show. Airports, for each airport you see the ICAO code, the IATA name, city, state, country, region, sub-region, and you have this column in use. In use means that of all the flight plans you have installed, there are some flight plans that have flights into or out of this airport. Also, you can see if you have marked this as one of your favorite airports. You can see the size category, and if you took time to set the rank and the traffic based on those combo boxes, you would see those settings here also. In this instance, for example, Boise, I have marked it as a plausible airport. And it's simply my way of categorizing. A plausible airport for me is an airport which look like it could be a real-life airport. Those with less value than 3, they will start to look cartoonish. You have airport and prepared that is basically just a runway and perhaps one building, and even though it's not a small airport, it doesn't look plausible in the flight simulator. I have set up to show these values, but also I can choose to switch over and show the hint text instead. And the text you enter here, it will search in the ICAO code, IATA name, city, state, country, and whatever for what you enter. But you can set up, say, I only want to choose to look in the ICAO code for this. So now you see all the ICAO codes that have KBO in the text. I can choose it should be in the name of the airport, and in this case there'll be none. Normally I just leave it here because most of the time I will be searching for the ICAO code. If I don't know the ICAO code, I can enter the name of the airport or the name of the city. For example, we can say like this. And one of the things it searches for is the state. So all states that have this text will be included. And here here's the city that contains the text and so on. If you have like this many, you can start to filter by country also. For example, I can click clear and I can choose a region. Let's choose a country. D for Denmark. And I see all Danish airports. I can manually scroll to the one I want to see and double click it, or I can, for example, I have Billund here. I can just, now it will show all Danish airports that contains the text BI, and it's only Billund. If you only want to see airports that, as I said before, I say I only want to see I don't want to see those that are very simple or simple. I only want to see plausible and upwards. So I can choose this setting. So now when I look, I only see airports I have marked as plausible or third party or enhanced. And the same with traffic. If I marked, I have marked many airports with ranks, but only few with traffic, because I need to go into each airport and look how much traffic there is. But if I had done that, I could choose to mark by traffic. So this is the search feature. It's limited to only show 2,000 airports. Here searching for all airports with an E in either Icaro, IATA, name, city, so on. It will find a lot of airports, but I have limited to only show 2,000, and that's simply because of speed, because in the data you have about 25,000 airports, and showing 25,000 items in this list box will limit the speeds. You see, from I enter till it actually finds something there, that goes some time. So 2,000 is for me a good setting, that I still have some speed in the application. This was search for an airport. But if I want to see all the traffic in and out of Boston, I instead choose this one, quick search legs. It's the same window that opens as if you press Control A, but when you double click an airport, it's something else that happens. I choose Boston again, and I double click it. Now it will look through all my flight plans and find all flight plans that have flights in and out of Boston. So when I double click Boston and I go to traffic, I can see the daily amount of traffic based on the flight plans I have installed. I can, when I choose the legs, I can see here. I can limit it to my favorites. I can sort by airline, for example, or by aircraft IATA code. For example, if I want to do a Airbus 319 flights into Boston, I can choose here to see where it comes from. For example, in this case, it's a flight from Detroit into Boston by this airline. I can see the flight number, when it's when it took off, when it's supposed to arrive here at Boston, the flight time from the flight plan, the calculated flight time, distance, flight level, and so on. So those are the two search features. One will only search the airport, and you can see the detail of the airport, and one will both search the airport, but it will also go through all your flight plans and find all the flights into and out of that airport. Okay, we have now looked at the airport info and how to search for airports. Let's look into the route information, the information we can see about each route. I will go and choose the flight plan for Danish air transport. Whenever you choose a flight plan, the map will recenter on that flight plan. In this case, we are going to look for flights between Copenhagen and Billund. And you see here the info view that pops up. It shows it's Copenhagen and Billund, and it shows the distance between them. Whenever you move the mouse around, you see it will highlight a route. So when a route is highlighted, you can right-click, and you can choose from the menu to view route information. It shows the airport. A route is not a specific flight. It's just all the flights between two airports. And that is why those two airports are simply marked as Airport 1 and Airport 2, because it can be flights from Billund to Copenhagen and vice versa. We will see some basic information about each airport. And if we want to, we can click the view details and we will go to the window we have seen before. And it show me all the aircrafts that are capable of flying that route. It doesn't mean that they're used in different flight plans. It just let me show the airplanes that are able to fly this route based on the distance. And I can limit this list to only include my favorite aircraft. So once again, it's a good idea to set up your favorite aircrafts because you can filter in many ways. And in this case, the route between these two airports are only served by this one aircraft, and that's because I only show for Danish air transport. I will later show you how the quick search legs function is working, where you can search based on many things. So the map might show routes served by many different airlines, and you would have more items in this list. In this case, I only have a single, and I can choose to double click it. And now this is a specific flight plan, so I know which one is my departure airport and which one is my destination airport. And like before, I showed the basic information, but now it's also relevant to know the estimated taxi in and out times. So this particular flight plan contains all these different flights, and it shows which one is highlighted. And for that highlighted leg or flight, you can see the aircraft serving that flight. You can see the flight number, the cruise speeds. This is the cruise speed from the flight plan, and this is the cruise speed I have entered for the aircraft. For each aircraft, I have entered a lot of different information. So I show both. Likewise, this is flight time from the flight plan, and this is my calculated flight time. You can see the flight level, you can see the carrier and the operator of this flight. Up here you can see the distance, and you can see the flight times. This is from the flight plan. You see the times in UTC. This is also the flight plan, but this the local times. over here you have the calculated times, and the difference between the flight plan times and the calculated times is simply the flight time. They will both depart 06:52 local times, but this one is marked for 28 minutes, so it will arrive 28 minutes. The difference between these two values, it will arrive quicker here than here because it's different flight times. If we take the local time from the flight plan, it will leave the gates at 06:52. The off time is calculated by adding the estimated taxi out time. So it's not actually the off time, it's the time it will be at the runway ready to take off. Likewise, the on time is subtracting the estimated taxi time from the in time. So you will start taxi in about 07:14 and you will be at the gate at 07:20. So you can use these times to see when approximately you should be at the runway and when you should leave the runway to be at the gate at this time. And if you want to, you can choose another flight here and it will show the information of that flight instead. All the information you have here, you can choose to copy to the clipboard. And I drag in a note tab. And you can, if you need to, you can take some of these data and put into some other program where you might need it or whatever. And you can choose to show, if I go back to the previous flight, this one, I can choose to use Flight Aware. It will open your web browser and it will search for those flights between those two airports and show the real life flights between those airports that are active. So that was the route info and the legs info windows. Next we're going to look at the quick search feature. I guess for most people the quick search feature will be the most important thing in this program because it allows you to search across many flight plans to find the flights that match your criteria. Like many other things, it have a shortcut, but otherwise you can use your mouse to pick it here from the menu. And a good idea is to begin by hitting the reset button. It clears all criteria back to the default settings. And now if I press search, it will basically include all flights because there's no criteria set. All flight plans are set to be included. All airlines are set to be included. All aircrafts are set to be included. There are no criteria as to the outbound or inbound airports. There's no criteria as to if you have to mark the airport as your favorite or the size or the classification of rank and traffic density. It will include all flights between 1 and 20 hours. So basically it means include all flights. And there's no requirement to the distance of the flight. It will include all flights that are between 0 and 20,000 nautical miles. So when I hit search, it shows how many legs it finds that match my criteria, and it shows how many routes it found. There can be many legs serving the same route, so that's why this number is smaller. And I will not recommend doing this, but if you hit OK, the map will look like a mess, because it simply show all the flights that are active, and as a result, the map is a bit sluggish to work with. In one of the previous versions, I changed how the route lines are drawn. You can see these are not looking very nice, and that's simply done to not have this map grind to a halt when you're showing this many flights. So let's do a more logic search instead. Again, it's not necessary because we hit reset before, but it's a good habit to start your search by hitting reset. So let's this time try to limit our search based on a few flight plans. So I start by selecting none, basically deselecting all flight plans, and I can choose a few flight plans. I can, for example, choose I want to see all Aeroflot flights and all Air Canada flights and all Air Cairo flights. So let's limit to all these three different flight plans, and I hit search again. This time the search was a lot quicker because we only had to look in 3 flight plans, and of course the result is a lot fewer routes being found. So if I choose, let's choose Düsseldorf and look at the legs. So we both have Aeroflot and Air Cairo flights in and out of Düsseldorf. And when you go to the traffic and you go to, for example, the airlines, you can see we have a lot more Aeroflot flights into and out of Düsseldorf than we have Air Cairo flights. So let's do another search again. We reset. So this time let's choose a specific carrier, and we can do that by going to airlines and choose select none, and then we choose it have to be a carrier only. And we choose, I want to choose Air Nostrum. Here. I search. And I'm told that there is none routes found. And that's because Air Nostrum are not the carrier. However, they are the operator of many flights. So if I choose operator only and do my search, it will actually find a lot of flights. They are another airline is the carrier, but Air Nostrum is the operator of these flights. So if I go to the legs page, and as you saw when we looked at Copenhagen, when I showed the pie chart, there was a lot of, as I recall, there was 33% Scandinavian airlines at Copenhagen, but only 28 as the carrier, and that's because they have flights where Air Nostrum is the operator. And you can see Air Nostrum are also the operator for other airlines than Scandinavian. me reset again. Let's say you just bought the Aerosoft 318, 319 package, and you want to find a suitable flight for this aircraft based on the flight plans installed with this software. I would begin by selecting none of the aircrafts and then I simply choose the Airbus 318-19 with and without sharklets. So now when I search, it will only find the legs or the flights that are served by this aircraft. And as you see, there's quite a lot. You can choose which flight to fly that are served by that aircraft. And this is probably the way I use this software the most myself. I might have a certain time that I'm able to perform this flight. So this time I will not reset, but I will add some additional search criteria. I say, okay, I don't want to fly a flight less than 1 hour and 30 minutes, but I will not fly more than, let's say, 2 hours and 30 minutes. And I simply hit the search. And so now there are fewer flights. And I can add additional search criteria. Of course, I could simply pick one of those flights, but I can add criteria. As you see, I have many airports that I have marked as favorites. So this feature you can only use when you have started marking favorites yourself. But I can choose that either the destination or the departure must be one of my favorite, or both airports need to be my favorite, or just airport 1, and that's the airport specified up here. In this case, I could choose both. I only want to fly to and from my favorite airports. And we are still only looking Airbus flights and only flights between 1 hour 30 minutes and 2 hours 30 minutes. So these are the European flights I have flown in a 318, 319, that last between 1.5 and 2.5 hours, and of taking off and landing in an airport I have marked as my favorite. I have flights in Australia, I have flights in Asia, I have flights in the States and South America, Africa, so on, that fulfill this criteria. For instance, if I for some reason say, okay, I only want to fly in Europe, I can go in and specify more. I can say the flight have to be inbound or outbound of, in this case, a region, Europe. And I can choose the opposite part of the flight to be Europe as well. And what opposite means, it means if the flight is outbound, it have to be inbound to Europe. Or if it's inbound to Europe, it have to be outbound of Europe. So that's the reason it's called opposite. And I can do the search. And now I only have the flights here. The reason you see these airports is because I have selected down here to show my favorites. If I deselect them, you will only see the European flights. I can go back. Let's do another search where we start to use the airport filters. I will reset this one and say I only want to see flights in my favorite aircrafts, because, for instance, I don't have the ATR, so why would I want to see the flights for that one? So when I choose this one, it will take only those aircraft that you have marked as your favorites. And I can choose, I want to see all flights that are outbound of, feeling a bit national here, so I choose Denmark, of course. From Denmark to United States. And only in my favorite aircraft. I don't put any additional filters. I just do a search. And I can see the flights between Denmark and United States based on all the flight plans I have installed. If I want to see which kind of aircraft that is performing this, I just have to hover the mouse over the route so it gets highlighted. And I can see down here, I can see the aircraft and the airline. So in this case, it's Norwegian, and it's served by a Boeing 787-9 serving this route. If I don't want to look here, I can simply right-click and view route info. I can see the details here. And as before, I can double-click to see this flight plan, all the flights in that serving the route, and I can view the time to take off and land and so on, like we looked at before. So basically that's the search feature. I'm sure it looked very complicated with all these kinds of way to filter, but as I showed you, you only need to filter what you need to filter. Many times I start by saying I'm not particularly, I don't need to take off and land at one of my favorite airports, but I want at least my departure or my destination to be one of my favorites. I only want to see my favorite aircraft, and perhaps I have a time limit saying, okay, today I don't want to fly any flights longer than 5 hours. I do my search. And I can choose what I want to see. In this case, it's very complicated, so I might add additional requirements. For example, now I can also say I want to fly in and out of Frankfurt today. So I can use the search feature if I want to, but I know the ICAO code for Frankfurt, so I simply enter that. And I say it has to be either the inbound or the outbound. I don't care if I start at Frankfurt or I end at my flight at Frankfurt. And some of these flights might be served by many different airlines. In this case, you have Korean Air, Aeroflot. Okay, those are the two serving that. So I say, okay, I want to fly Korean Air 777 flight between these airports, and I can see which time I should, in this case, the flight departs from Moscow and it arrives at Frankfurt, and I can see when to leave the gate and when I should be at the gate at Frankfurt. So that's basically the search feature. Lastly, we are going to look at the randomize feature. And to be honest, I don't think many of you are going to use it. I simply added it because it was something I would use from time to time. And it's basically just a window that's able to show some randomized values, and you can use it for many different things. This is how the window appears when you open it. I'm not sure if I have a file. No. But for instance, I'm using Rex. I'm using the sky textures and so on, then the airport product. And in my Rex products, I have set up some templates or some favorites that I use from time to time. But to not have the same kind of skies every time, I sometimes choose a different set. And for that, I can simply say, okay, I have Rex, and I want it to choose a value between 1 and 21, because I have 21 of these templates. So I can use this feature. So often when before I begin my flight, I go in here and I asked it to generate a random value, and in this case it generated 3. And once I have a random value, I go into Rex and I choose that template for today. So next time I fly it, I'll have another template. So the skies are not, the clouds are not looking the same every time I fly. You can also use this feature to find inspiration, what to fly. For instance, this is a random value between 1 and 21. So it will never generate one above 21 or lower than 1. But for instance, if you want to randomize the season you fly, you could say, okay, give me a number between 1 and 4, and you could say 1 is spring, 2 is summer, 3 autumn, 4 winter, so on. But also you can do it as text. So I give it a header, I call it season, and I say spring and summer, autumn and winter. And when I hit the pick item button, it will choose one of these. And statistically, there'll be the same chance it will be spring as it will be winter. But if I say, okay, I prefer flying spring and summer, so I can make 3 springs, 3 summers, and then perhaps 2 autumns. So now it will be a bigger chance that the result will be spring or summer than it will be autumn or winter. Or you can say, okay, I want to fly morning, afternoon, evening, or aircraft, for example. I want the Airbuses or the Boeings or whatever, and you can use this as inspiration. So when you want to fly, perhaps you will start using this randomizer to figure out when you want to, which time of year, which time of day, which aircraft to fly. Oh, that I did well. And once you have picked some values in here, you can use them in the leg search. For example, in this case, I would search only for flights in an Airbus 320. You cannot specify season or times in the search window, but in those results you can simply pick one. Let's try it. We go to the search window, reset, select none, only select the 320. I will include the Neo also, even though it's not a Neo plane I have. I know this is a bad idea because there's a lot of them. And I can use the airport search function, Control A, choose Frankfurt, and I can see all the flights in and out of Frankfurt, and I can choose which airline I want to fly. And if I using my randomized windows, let's choose an outbound. If I were in my randomized windows chose I want to fly at in the afternoon, I can simply scroll to a departure time in the afternoon. So that's a randomizer function. As I begin to say, I don't think many of you will use it, but if you need random values, you can use this form. There are 10 random numbers, and there are 6 of these lists. And if you need more than that, you can save it to a file and then load it at a later time. Be careful with the reset all, because it will reset all. It will remove your lists and your criteria over here. So if you made a setup you use more than once, be sure to save it so you can load it again if you accidentally reset it and didn't want to do it. Okay, that concludes this video. I hope I did not ramble too much. I started too much, but that was an overview of Flightplan Visualizer, and I plan to do more videos to show other things of this program, for instance, how to import flight plans and so on. So if interested, keep an eye for them. Thank you.